We're speaking with Leo Haviland, and our topic is the American and world debt scene. Leo, has the U.S. improved its overall debt situation very much since the worldwide economic crisis?
Very little, Scott. One should look at some figures. Total credit market debt as a percent of nominal GDP in 2007 reached 353% of nominal GDP, and during the financial crisis year of 2009, it reached 371%. By the end of 2013, however, it was 351%. What was that compared with 30 years ago? In 1981, it was only 164%, and back in ancient history, 1951, it was only about 130%. So there's been a massive debt increase here, and one can argue that the United States has a debt culture.
Well, we get the impression, though, that households are in better shape today than they were at the end of the financial crisis.
Indeed, they are, Scott. By several percentage points, they've reduced their overall indebtedness as a percent of GDP. However, we live in a we the people country and a representative government, so the federal debt has increased massively over the past several years. So we the people are very indebted.
Whether it's our own debt or the government's debt, right? Well, let's talk about the U.S. federal budget and whether it's getting any better.
It has improved in terms of its relative size compared to GDP, having been well over 8% or even over 9% at the height of the worldwide economic disaster and its aftermath. It's since fallen to about 2.5% to 3% for the next several years. However, it then embarks on a rising trend to get over 3% by the latter part of the 2017, 18, 19 period. And even more significantly, Scott, there's been no progress in reducing the very dangerous long-run debt problems that remain on the fiscal front. We remain a culture and nation wedded to entitlements and wedded to debt, and you don't hear anyone now, hardly, talking about generating surpluses.
We don't hear anyone talking about generating surpluses. There seems to be a level of comfort with the debt in Washington. Is this worrisome? What do we have to worry about in this picture that you've just painted, now or in the long term?
You raise an interesting point about Washington. There we have our beloved President, Senate, and House of Representatives engaged in logjam where they can't agree on much of anything. So should problems on the fiscal front arise, as they inevitably will under most longer run forecasts, that political gridlock stands as a massive problem to any near-term solution. So what probably will be necessary to make the world less complacent about debt will either be a miraculous productivity gain or growth miracle here and the rest of the world, which is unlikely in the view of most experts, or a renewed debt crisis here or somewhere else. Fear tends to generate action in Washington.
Well, let's talk about that political gridlock. We're in an election year, it's 2014. Do we expect more gridlock? Do we expect an improvement in the situation after the election?
More gridlock. The president, of course, doesn't have to run until 2016, so that will remain Democratic. The House, of course, is strongly Republican, and most people believe Republicans will retain control of the House. So regardless of what happens in the Senate, where it seems as if the Republicans may pick up a couple of seats, perhaps gain control should the economy worsen more, there's still going to be a split between a Democratic president and at least one House of Congress that's Republican. So no progress at all in the 2014 election, and 2016 we'll have to see.
So little, if any, progress expected here. Let's look outside the U.S. And first of all, can you compare the debt situation in Europe, Japan, with the one that you just described in the U.S.?
Excellent issue, Scott. The European overall debt situation is not as severe as the American one. The Eurozone budget deficits have gradually been declining towards the 3% targets that they view as deficits which are not too high. And the overall general government debt as a percentage of nominal GDP is a bit less than that of America and are probably on a declining trend according to the International Monetary Fund. As for Japan, its budget deficits not only are substantial, probably worse than here, but its general government debt is of the order of 230 or 240% of nominal GDP, which dwarfs that of America. So Japan's situation is much worse than America's. However, thus far, Japan has been blessed by being a nation of savers, so the households and others Japanese have been willing to finance those deficits. But it's a very dangerous situation over there.
Will Mr. Abe's plan work in Japan? Abenomics, they call it.
So far, it seems that it has worked on the inflation front. They probably will be able to achieve their 2% inflation goal, which is a significant change from the longstanding years of slight deflation. They have boosted, at least in the short term, confidence within Japan. So that has been a success for Abenomics. However, on the growth side, it looks as if its success has been and will be rather mediocre with, for the next couple of years, real GDP growth of about 1% or so. And the debt situation, of course, has only become worse. It's simply a fabrication to imagine that continued massive money printing over time is going to bring prosperity to Japan any more than it will for the United States. So Abenomics is a slight success on inflation, but not significant in what really matters in real GDP growth and solution of the debt crisis there.